Now available for the first time on Google Play, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are falling apart in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy on Google Play today. Historical Men in Crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about Ed Gein and Richard Crafts. All images used in this video are under fair use of United States copyright law of 1976 and are used in conjunction with my commentary. Now, the first historical man in crisis I'm going to be talking about is Ed Gein. Now, your Ed Gein was a murderer and a deviant who did unspeakable things to women's bodies in the 1950s. And your Ed Gein's unspeakable acts were the inspiration for the Norman Bates character in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, and it was also the inspiration for the Buffalo Bill character in the movie The Silence of the Lambs, and is believed to be the inspiration for the Leatherface character from the movie The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. However, Ed Gein was on the road to becoming a man in crisis due to the dysfunctional way he was raised in his home with a beta male father, George Gein, and a domineering and emasculating mother, Augusta Gein. And because Augusta Gein did not like her husband, they oftentimes argued and were upset with each other, and Augusta had a deep contempt for her husband, but stayed in the marriage due to her religious beliefs about divorce. And because she had these deep religious beliefs about divorce, she tried to stay with a man she could not stand. However, what I found to be quite interesting is that Augusta Gein, even though she hated her husband, went out here and operated a grocery store and then purchased a farm on the outskirts of Plainfield, Wisconsin, things that were diametrically opposed to the Word of God, which tells women to go out here and submit to their husbands. But she was out here running her own business and looking for ways to get away from her husband, and her anger at her husband had a extremely negative influence on her sons, and she moved her family outside on the outskirts of Plainfield, Wisconsin, to keep, I believe, not only from the outsiders from influencing her sons, but I also believe that she did this to keep her kids from becoming men like her father. Because when it comes down to many of these domineering women, they oftentimes have an unconscious anger about the choice that they made as related to the man they got involved with, and what they want to do is turn their sons into a better man. And I go in depth on this in my book, Manginas. They look like men, but they act like ladies. And what they want to do is turn their sons into this kinder, gentler, softer male who is not like their father, oftentimes not understanding that they're lighting the fuse to make these boys ticking time bombs, and eventually these men will wind up exploding in rage. Now, as your Augusta Gein was raising her sons in her way, what she was doing was going out here and telling the boys that about the innate immorality of the world, the evil of drinking, and the belief that all women were prostitutes. Now, this had a major impact on your Ed Gein and his brother, and it basically twisted both boys, I believe, because as she was out here teaching the boys her own twisted religion, she was twisting Ed Gein into a boy who was well on the road to becoming a man in crisis. Now, Ed Gein, the younger brother, was one who had an extremely codependent relationship with his mother, and this codependent relationship made him a target for bullies, and he had extremely effeminate, off-putting mannerisms, and also participated in random laughter. And I believe that's because of the isolation he had, and growing up in that extremely strict household, this basically led to the boy becoming antisocial at an early age, And as he saw his mother being the only authority figure, he was trying to please her, but he could never please her because she was just extremely angry at the father, and she took out all of her anger at the boy's father by doing things like abusing them and then saying things that they were destined to become failures like their father. And this was what led to the boys becoming extremely antisocial and extremely detached, because the mother herself, being the first teacher, was teaching the boys toxic ideas. And as she was teaching the boys toxic ideas, these boys were becoming extremely dysfunctional. Now, Ed Gein's older brother was trying to break out of the programming that his mother had given him, and was still trying to go out here and start to disregard his mother. And he was looking to possibly leave the family, but sadly, this wasn't the case, because after George Gein died of a heart attack, the boys started working odd jobs, and they were out here working regularly, but they weren't really actualizing their potential, again, due to the fact that their mother went out here and spoke negatively against them. And again, while they were working as handymen and doing different types of odd jobs, Henry Gein started to go out here and started to become more independent, and he started to reject his mother's worldview. But he also worried about his brother Ed, who had this extremely codependent relationship with his mother, and your Ed was basically out here because he was so attached to his mother. This is what I believe led to him having issues with his brother, because a brush fire burned close to the farm in May of 1944, and it's alleged that possibly Ed Gein wound up murdering his brother, because it was reported that Ed said that he was separated from his brother in the fire that they were trying to put out, and then eventually his brother was found dead with no burns on his body, but a bunch of bruises on his head. So this possibly could have been the first murder that Ed Gein possibly could have committed, because again, when beta males hear somebody speak against their mother, this is what leads to many beta males becoming extremely emotional, and it leads to them becoming emotional because this is the one person who has power and authority in their relationship, and this is the person who they basically deify like a god. So speaking against a beta male's mother is like speaking against God, and this possibly will lead to them exploding in a rage where they're going to look to do harm to someone. And again, I believe Ed Gein's first victim was his brother, and I believe he wound up murdering his brother because this fits right in line with the pattern and profile for beta males. And again, I believe he murdered his brother, Henry, because he wanted to start being his own man. And as he wanted to be his own man, this is what led to him winding up looking to be targeted by his brother, who he knew was a man in crisis. And again, because he possibly wanted to move away and be his own man, this is what really angered your Ed, who again wanted to still remain in that state of arrested codependent development that he had with his mother. Now, after the death of Henry Gein, Ed Gein lived with his mother, and she died on December 29th, 1945, after a series of strokes. And that's when Ed Gein basically wound up snapping, and he wound up as I believe his second psychotic episode, because I believe his first was when he found out his brother spoke against his mother. And I believe that what happened after this is led to him falling completely apart as related to his mental state. And because after this, Ed Gein remained on the farm, helping support it with odd jobs, but he boarded up rooms used by his mother, including the upstairs, downstairs parlor, and living room, and left them untouched, and then lived in a squalid condition in a small room next to the kitchen, and became obsessed with death cult magazines, Nazi stories, and adventure stories. And again, all of these type of pulp stories are quite troubling, because when people read these stories and their mind isn't in the right place, they wind up participating in extremely disturbing ideas, and they wind up just thinking about these extremely disturbing ideas. And what's really troubling is that Ed Gein, as he was reading these types of stories, he was out here just coming up with extremely deviant ideas by going out here, and they believe that he participated in some kidnappings, and he also went to graveyards and did things to human bodies that I just will not even talk about, because these actions are just extremely disturbing. What Ed Gein had done to these human bodies, just absolutely sick behavior. And again, I just don't even want to talk about those things, because they are just absolutely sick. And one of the things that he did was go out here and look to make things like a body suit. Again, inspiration for Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, hoping to become more connected to his mother. Again, absolutely sick behavior. And he also went out here and allegedly wound up kidnapping and murdering two women, a bar or a tavern owner, and another woman who owned another business. And he wound up mutilating their bodies in an extremely disturbing fashion. And I don't even want to talk about the way that this man did these things, because it's just the things that he's considered to have done are absolutely sick. And there are some people like Evelyn Hartley, Georgia Weckler, and Ray Burgess and Victor Travis who were never found, but people believe that Ed Gein possibly wound up murdering them. And the reason why he wound up murdering them is because of the dysfunctional way he was raised by Augusta Gein, who wound up repressing his natural manhood and natural masculinity. And because his natural manhood and masculinity were forced into suppression, he looked to go out here and express that in a place I call the secret world. And inside of that secret world, this is where your Ed Gein wanted to go out here and find women's bodies as related to corpses and mutilate their bodies. And he said the only reason why he did not have intercourse with these bodies, participating in necrophilia, is because the bodies smelled so badly. But it just showed how sick this male was, because he was a male who basically never learned how to be a man, and he was ashamed to be a man because his mother told him that being a man was bad. And his repression of his masculinity led to all of this rage that he had, and he took that anger out on many innocent people, again mutilating two to possibly 3 or 4 innocent women, and then going out here and desecrating the corpses of women, all because he was a male who was taught dysfunction. And what's really sad is that his behavior basically turned into a self-fulfilling prophecy, because Augusta Gein said that her sons wouldn't be anything, and sadly they didn't accomplish anything in life except becoming men in crisis. And sadly, Ed Gein wound up to becoming a man in crisis, and again his crimes were just so evil. And it just shows how sick a male can become, because these beta males are extremely depraved, and this Ed Gein is one of the most depraved individuals I have ever read about in my life. I mean, I just read his story and it just absolutely disturbed me to the core of my soul, hearing about what he did to the store owner Bernice Warden, hearing about what he did to Mary Hogan, the tavern owner. Just reading about these things made me sick to the core of my soul, and it just made me think about just how sick this man was when they found the items inside of his home. I mean, this man was an absolute monster. I mean, just an absolute monster. And again, he shows how deeply depraved a beta male can be due to the dysfunctional way he is raised by his mother. Because when you have a mother like Ed Gein, wound up having, she again creates a toxic, self-fulfilling prophecy, and again, all because of her anger at the father. And again, it would have just been better for her to just continue living in sin and violating her whole religious beliefs by divorcing the father, it would have been better to do that than to just have these boys grow up in this insanity, because she again created this self-fulfilling prophecy with her children, and because she spoke badly about her sons, she turned one of her sons into one of the sickest men in crisis that has ever been in the history of beta males. The second historical man in crisis I'm going to be talking about is Richard Crafts. And Richard Crafts is infamously known as the wood chipper killer for murdering his wife Helly by killing her and then disposing of her body by feeding parts of it through a wood chipper. Now, while there was no body ever found as related to the death of Helly Crafts, police managed to find enough evidence, such as a tooth that matched dental records and other assorted body parts, that allowed them to be able to create a case to try and convict Richard Crafts. Now, Richard Crafts, I believe, was on the road to becoming a man in crisis, because as a male, he basically felt he could not measure up to the success of his father. And because he could not go out here and meet the success of his father, this led to him having a serious inferiority complex. And that serious inferiority complex is what led to him heading down the road to becoming a pilot. And he became a pilot and met Helly Nielsen. And as he met Helly Nielsen, his issues as related to his inferiority complex basically led to him making a marriage that did not work out. Now, as your Richard Crafts was having his marriage with Helly Crafts, he was becoming extremely frustrated because he wanted to maintain a smooth world, and that smooth world wound up becoming rough once he found out that his wife became pregnant. Now, with many beta males, they oftentimes become extremely angry when their world is about to change, and one of the greatest changes a man is going to have in his life is when his wife becomes pregnant. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with beta males, they want to have their smooth world, and they want to have their world where they can go out here and be able to do whatever they want without having to take any sort of responsibility. And this possibly led to a lot of the domestic violence that was alleged as related to Helly Crafts, who was getting beaten up basically for being pregnant, which is a natural biological function of a woman in a marriage and is something that is expected. But when you're dealing with the beta male, they want their world to be smooth. And because they want their world to be smooth, where they don't have to deal with any conflicts, problems, or obstacles, they want to be able to go out here and be able to have everything go their way. And that's what led to an extremely traumatizing pregnancy for Helly Crafts as related to their first child. And then they still went on to have 2 more children. And because Richard Crafts made a lot of money as a pilot, he went out here and hired a nanny to go out here and help take care of the kids, because Helly was a stewardess as well. So these kids were being raised by a man in crisis, and this man in crisis had all sorts of double standards, because while he was angry at his wife for her natural pregnancies, he was out here womanizing and having affairs with other women. But this is par for the course when you're dealing with a beta male, because beta males oftentimes, when they go out here and they can't have their smooth world with their wife, they go out here and look to have other women and other relationships with women, and they look to have these affairs because they want to hurt the woman they're involved with, and they want to show her that he can always go out here and do better. And this is something, again, beta males do, because, again, beta males really do not like women. They just like to be able to use their bodies. And that's basically what Richard Crafts was doing as he was having these affairs. And as he was having these affairs and abusing his wife, he was just continuing to just be extremely cruel to her. And as he was being cruel to her, Helly was trying to deal with this as related to taking care of the children, but eventually just got fed up and got enough courage to finally stand up to Richard Crafts. And as she tried to stand up to Richard Crafts, he looked to put her down permanently because he did not see her as a person, because in many cases your beta males don't see people as people. They see them as objects in their world, and because they see them as objects in their world, they go out here, and whenever those people push back against them, they believe they have a right to destroy their lives because that person is pushing back against them. Now, your Richard Crafts, I believe, in this case, felt, oh, this woman has the audacity to go out here and divorce me and further disrupt my smooth world. So what he wanted to do was end her world for going out here and disrupting his smooth world. So that's, I believe, was the motive for Richard Crafts looking to murder his wife, because he was one of these guys who wanted to have a smooth world. And he was also showing me patterns as related to him being a beta male, because beta males oftentimes, they like to hoard items as related to power, like what Richard Crafts, they said he was collecting guns, and they also never really finish anything, because Richard Crafts' home, while he was a very nice home, it was never really finished. And with beta males, they never really finish anything, because beta males can never commit to anything, because they fear that if they finish something, they may be called to meet standards, and this is something that many beta males really don't like to do. So Richard Crafts had a home filled with a lot of landscaping equipment that he had bought, including a $25,000 backhoe, and all of this stuff was sitting there because he could never really finish anything. And because nothing was ever really finished in his life, he wound up looking to, again, try to just pursue different things. But that's what beta males do, because beta males never finish anything. And the whole idea of a divorce meant the end of the marriage. It meant things were going to change. And it meant also that he would have to actually deal with actual accountability. And because he had to deal with actual accountability, this is something beta males don't like to deal with, because everything is usually somebody else's fault. But in this case, he would actually be confronted by this in a divorce court, where he would be held accountable for all of the extramarital affairs that he had, and he would also be held accountable for all of the domestic violence he had participated in. And these were things Richard Crafts didn't want people to know about him, because he wanted to have his smooth world. And because he wanted to have his smooth world, what your Richard Crafts decided to do was he decided to allegedly murder his wife, and he decided to murder his wife and dispose of her in a way that would allow him to continue having his smooth world. So with beta males, what they do in order to maintain their smooth world is they will go out here and try to remove individuals who are making life rough for them. And Kelly Crafts was making life hard for Richard. So Richard decided, sadly, to murder his wife, and he decided to dispose of her body by renting a freezer and other, not renting a freezer, but he bought a freezer and other items, and he then cut up her body and then fed it through a wood chipper, and possibly would have gotten away with this murder by just having there being no body. And with there being no body, he would be able to go on with his life and go on to have his smooth world, until possibly one of the women he got involved with wound up suffering the same fate. Because when you're dealing with a beta male, the beta male wants to keep their world smooth, and because they want to keep their world smooth, it doesn't matter what woman they get involved with, because when you get involved with the beta male, everything is about his world. And again, when you're dealing with beta males, they want to keep their world where nobody knows what about anything that they're doing wrong. And this is something that happens with beta males, because beta males are just very sick and disturbed individuals. And Richard Crafts would have possibly took his wife's life and made it where she disappeared, and said that she got on a plane and disappeared. This would have been the lie that he would have told if he had gotten away with this crime. And he would have gone out here and gotten away with all of this because he would wanted to keep his world smooth. However, evidence was found on his property, and blood and items were found inside of this wood chipper. And as the blood was found in the wood chipper and other parts of Helly Kraut's body were found on the properties wherever he disposed of, where he chipped up the body, eventually there was enough evidence to create a circumstantial case, because Richard Crafts had cut out a piece of carpet in his bedroom. And again, all sorts of evidence started coming together that basically built up a case against Richard Crafts and led to his conviction for the murder of his wife. And with this conviction of the murder of his wife, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and he possibly had to deal with Bubba and Tiny in that time. And his world got a lot rougher because this beta male could not deal with the fact that he went out here and just was in a marriage that he should have never been in. Because with beta males, they just don't understand that if you don't want to get married, don't get married. You can go out here and be a whoremonger male and have all the sex with all the women you want. But the whole thing with beta males is they always want to be the good guy in the story, but they don't see how their behavior is just evil and diabolical, because in their attempts to keep their world smooth and stay the good guy, eventually they wind up becoming an extremely evil person, because it would have just been better for Richard Crafts to go out here and accept the divorce. But I guess he didn't want to pay the child support. I guess he didn't want to have to deal with the fact that he was the reason for the divorce. And again, this is what happens when you're dealing with beta males. Beta males want to keep their world smooth, and they'll go to extremes to keep their world smooth, where they don't have to deal with any problems, but they don't see where they are the problem. And they are the problem because they are men in crisis, and they're men in crisis because many of these men, they're insecure about their manhood, they're insecure about their masculinity, they're insecure about their male identity, and that's what makes these men extremely dangerous to be around. And many women don't know the danger of being around these men until a relationship with them starts to become hard. And when that relationship starts to become hard, that's when these men start exploding in rage, and that's when the woman sees that the man that they're involved with is a monster, and this man is a monster because he is a man in crisis. Now, if you want to learn more about what motivates males like Ed Gein and Richard Crafts to participate in their criminal behavior, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. And if you want to see me do more videos about historical men in crisis, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App. And if I know something about that historical man in crisis, I will make that video for you. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Man Crisis, comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today.